We've been talking about it for quite a bit. We've been talking about it for what seems like months, which probably has been months, but we've been waiting for the next season, and it's finally here. And the beautiful part is that there was actually hockey played today, at least internally. There were scrimmages. There's a very short window here to get ready. Typically, right, there's training camp. There's dev camps over the summer. There's really time to prepare. We don't have that in this case. In this case, it's hit the ground running immediately. And, you know, in a lot of ways, it's maybe one of the more entertaining routes to go past, because, you know, where we kind of walk into camp now and just battles for spots immediately. And that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about kind of what we've heard. If you haven't followed, you know, kind of along, check out Jamie Baskow's tweets so today is Monday, January 4th. Check out the January 4th tweets, probably into the 5th, 6th, and so on. His tweeting has been amazing. Obviously, we're partners for the site, but his tweeting has just been fantastic about this topic. So if you want to see like any of the real-time updates, any of the stuff I'm talking about here, go check it out on Twitter. You just follow Jamie, and everything's right there for you. And obviously, you can go to our handle as well at Flyers Nitty with a K. And you can follow. He usually retweets himself, or we retweet him, or whatever. But he's out there and he's doing the work with that stuff. So check it out. But outside of that, I want to talk about camp battles. I want to get the first and foremost, most exciting news out of the way. Nolan Patrick has been cleared for contact. He was on the ice today. He was practicing along the lines of TK and Oscar Lindblom. And if you guys have been paying attention to my podcast, I've mentioned this not just recently, but overall throughout the time since I've probably been writing about Nolan Patrick, Oscar Lindblom, and TK together at the NHL level. I've talked about how that is kind of the future top line. It seems like a line, and the balancing is there. You have your large size in the middle with your kind of elite talent two-way, but offensive center. You have your elite winger who's a goal scorer, point producer, speedy, power, kind of like your Mark Recchi type, right? Then you got your Lindros type with Patrick, and then you got your left wing Lindblom, who's maybe not a Leclerc type, but a defensive, sturdy, maybe more of a Yuri Lettera, Yuri Lettinen from back in the day. Just a guy who can really play defense, a two-way game, or even let's say Simone Gagne, right? But Lindblom just brings an elite two-way game for sure. And with the boost he made last year, offensive production, he seems like a legit top six forward, a guy that you can definitely pencil in at least to your second line, potentially even a top line player. So we see that line of practice. It's being used. It won't be the only place we see Patrick used. I wouldn't say what I'm talking about now is set in stone. He could still end up being the default third line center, but I've talked about this. If he's available, if he really is ready, I would not baby him. I would not put him in for 10 games or anything slow like that. It means he goes in and the coach uses him as needed, as he thinks he's going to use. That's how they're going to do it, right? So if he sees that as the combination, then that's the combination that's going to be tested. It doesn't mean it's going to be the final results, right? Like Kevin Hayes still had really good on-ice chemistry with Konechny. And we know that. We know that there are combinations that work, right? So they're going to test stuff. But long-term, that does seem like a viable option. You still have that top line you can throw together of Giroux, Couturier, Voracek, and then you have the third line of, essentially probably Kevin Hayes, Farabee, and my guess is still JVR, is that they start that way, but we'll see, right? There's a lot of young names. So let's actually go through some of the other guys. Newcomers, Forrester, Wisdom, and Ross, all on the team. Also Max Willman, who's returning player. He's a lower level player, ECHL, AHL guy. I'm not sure exactly why he's there, to be honest with you, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. I would say it's a good thing. He's probably better than I assumed to some degree, and he probably has value at the AHL level, or maybe even some kind of pro upside that I might not know about, but something to just, take note of, a guy that maybe you'll hear about at least at the AHL level next year a little bit more. But Forrester, Wisdom, and Ross, I've heard some rumors. Now, Ross is above 20, so he can play. We know we're short a goalie, right? Ustimenko's out. And for anybody who's not aware, he's out long-term. He had his surgery, so he's out. So we know we have problems there, right? We have to essentially recover a goalie. I don't know if Ross is the long-term solution for the season. I know it works on paper. He's 20 years old. He's cheap. They can bring him over. He's in the area. He was drafted by Fletcher. Maybe to some degree they think that. But I have a very hard time seeing the Phantoms starting Felix Sandstrom and Roddy Ross, going from Alex Lyon Berube and Ustamenko. It's a pretty big drop-off, so I do think somebody else will be brought in maybe at a later date, probably when the AHL plays. I don't really think they're in a rush. At this point, I think they just see it as an opportunity to bring your guys in, maybe bring an outside vet a little later when you really need it, and just see what happens injury-wise. So see where Alex Lyon is overall. But obviously all the goaltenders are going. Carter Hart had a great, interesting quote where he said he wants to be the best player he can be. And obviously, I've said this before, I gush about the kid. I think he's a franchise caliber goalie, and I don't think the league is aware that he maybe is the best goalie in the league already at his age. And I know it's controversial. It's really not a controversial statement. He's played that way. There are other young goalies you can make that case for as well. But he's up there in that conversation. So you can say, oh, Shesterkin's better. Maybe. He hasn't been so far. I would say no young goaltender has been better in the small sample size. But it matters. So we'll see. Again, I'm projecting outwardly. I could definitely be wrong about Carter. But with him, I truly see sky's the limit. And it just seems like he's bringing that this year. Again, Giroux on fire camp, scoring goals. I've said this over and over again. For anybody who thinks that Giroux's about to take a back seat, I would expect the exact opposite. I would expect this guy to probably hit another level this year from where he was last year. Maybe continue where he finished off the season, where he, I believe, put up 18 points in 18 games or 14 games, something like that. Slightly over a point per game pace. I could see Giroux back at that pace, a point per game pace this year, and really driving the offense. It's going to need to come from Giroux because the power play really needs to roll. I mean, Gustafsson was brought in here to fix it. There's obviously other internal tools, but, it's got to get done. So as far as camp battle, Sam Morin is playing for a fourth-line role. I mean, quite frankly, the amount of goals that I keep hearing he's scoring at practice, I think for sure he's probably starting off as 13th forward. I don't know if he's going to start in the starting lineup. He has a difficult role to catch, right? He's got to catch Raffle. He's got to catch Aube-Kubel, and he's not catching Lawton, and that's essentially the guys in his way. Maybe Farabee, but it's just not going to happen. So I can see him being rotated in with injuries. If he's better than I anticipate, then he will take that spot from somebody. He was always a talented kid. He was a talented defenseman. I don't think he was ever going to be just a bottom-end D. I think his knee has created problems for him, but I think he's a very valuable player physically, emotionally. I think he's intimidating. I think he brings so many things to the game. His wingspan. He would have been a good defensive player. I think they could still use him. Maybe even use him on the PK to block shots on the PK side over time. We don't know how to develop, but it's the only real chance for him to make the NHL. And if they drop him through waivers, there's a chance he might not make the NHL in the future. There is also a chance he gets taken. Maybe another team wants to try him at forward. We have no idea. The idea has already been thrown out there. So Morin's coming in there. I like that he's getting confident. I like that he's out there. Flyers need an enforcer. Can Morin play that role? I definitely think he can. We'll see how he does in a power forward role. But he'll be given the opportunity, and I love that, and I love Sam Morin, so I hope he gets that role. Tanner Lazinski's out. He's recovering. I think he's going to be out for another 4 weeks, so he'll be ready for the AHL season. That camp tryout is gone, essentially, at this point. He didn't have the best, I would say he had the best chance of the newcomers. Maybe you could say Sandin, potentially. But I wouldn't say he was kind of a lock. It's tough to make the NHL. But, you see guys like Hayes do it, and Kajula and VC. This is the type of caliber player we're potentially talking about with Lazinski. I don't know if he's going to be as good as Kevin Hayes, but he could be a guy who's, in that tier, a guy who can walk in after college, make it in the NHL pretty quickly. I think there is a chance of that with Lazinski. But with the injury, again, no. Frost, I didn't get to see him, but obviously just some notes from Bill Meltzer. Frost apparently dangling, scoring goals, just looking really sharp. I believe that. I've said this over and over again. Anybody who counts him out for making the team out of camp should not be. When you have that much talent, just don't limit him. You don't know. What if the kid is working his butt off? He comes back 10 pounds heavier and faster than everybody at camp. They're going to say, oh yeah, go sit in the Phantoms. No, they're going to want to use him, right? So that's where we are with Frost. He's an exceptionally talented kid. He just was always going to be kind of a longer-term project. He was drafted later. This is what happens. And I wouldn't even consider really long-term. When he came to the NHL, he wasn't bad. He had impacts. It showed that he had impact players, just more inconsistency. So I think there's a chance he makes the team too. And if that's the case, we have the taxi cab squad, but Aube-Kubel, Raffle, you guys should be worried about your jobs right now. because, if Frost looks incredible, I'm not saying he's going to play a fourth line role, but JVR might be playing that fourth line role, or JVR might be sitting for Frost. I mean, that stuff could happen. If he plays the way he did last year, that could happen. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't want to say. I'm not counting out JVR. I've always liked him in the past, and I think he actually, the season before last season, played very well, and I would never take him out of lineup if he plays that way. And I don't know. I'm still open for it. It's just great to see Frost that way. Maybe they'll probably start him off slow regardless, but it's awesome to see, and there is a chance he makes the team out of camp. Always. With a kid of this much skill, nobody thought Konechny was going to make it, but he makes it. If you're better, you're just better, and it gets proven on the ice. And that's the nice thing about this camp. A lot of other things going on. Wade Allison on the ice was just so awesome to see. This is a guy I definitely see as an NHL player. Potentially even a top 6 forward if he can get back to where he was pre-injury. We'll see how he goes along. He might make the team out of camp, but unlikely. Taxi cab squad is possible with a guy like this. Ratcliffe won't be ready, right? Ustomenko's not ready. Lazinski's not ready, right? There's injuries, right? So he still has some other guys ahead of him to some degree, but more based off of reputation within the team, not necessarily talent. Like a guy like Torensky is not more talented than Wade Allison. It might not actually be more NHL ready than Wade Allison. Something to consider as well, even though Torensky's played well. Bunneman, another guy, right? Bunneman, I would say, is more NHL ready than Torensky for sure. Played really well. Maybe he is even the favorite of the young kids to kind of play that extra role. But also, Frost is more talented. No offense, Bunny, even though you're awesome. But, Frost has got serious offensive upside. And then you look at a guy like Allison who projects to be, just a really good shooter, physical, who could score goals and play D and kind of bring it all. Even Albek Hubel should be a little nervous, right? Even though he played exceptional last year. I don't think this is going to happen, but you got to think a little bit down the line. Maybe by the end of the season, Allison is ready. We'll see. You never know. This is probably a big reason why more names weren't brought in. And also you can see Patrick, and I brought this up on my podcast, the fact that you didn't see Patrick with you didn't see the Flyers bring in some kind of resource to kind of make sure that Patrick was going to be okay. Like, look, Lazinski's out already, right? And they didn't bring in any insurance. They're pretty confident, at least in their center depth. I think Fletcher is at least, even if Patrick's not ready, maybe they'll just throw Frost in there a lot quicker than we would assume, because we're still used to Hextall, who's a lot more conservative than Fletcher in certain things. In other things, they're about the same. I don't think Fletcher is like some kind of crazy experimentation guy. I think he's just more willing to take risks, and I like that, honestly. And maybe it's because he's been fired before. Maybe he's been fired before, and he's like, whatever, I don't care. I'm going to make my team the way I did. I played. Maybe he did a little more scared GMing in Minnesota. Maybe that's why he moved Brent Burns, because he was worried about, they told him to move him, right? You got this high-powered asset, you got to move him. That's why he hasn't moved Ghost, because he's kind of like, well, I'm not going to budge anymore. I have an internal instinct. So, I don't know. I'm kind of spitballing here, but I love what Fletcher says. I mean, every now and then he throws stuff out. You see his enthusiasm towards Morin. They're having conversations like this internally. And there's a lot of other players kind of showing up. I mean, Igor Zamula is there. He has a chance to make the taxi cab squad for real. Wyatt Wiley, I think, will get a look. Probably not ready, but it's awesome. And he's a right side defenseman, so it's fantastic he's here. Derek Pouliot will probably get an extended look. He could make taxi cab guy. This is a guy who was a high-end pick at one point as well. He does have a high-end skill set for the AHL. Think about like a TJ Brennan, maybe even a little bit better defensively. We'll see. I don't know, but TJ Brennan was very good offensively. I expect Pouliot to be somewhere around that. We'll see how he plays, but he could be kind of an extended look guy. Probably not making the NHL, but a taxi cab guy. Mark Friedman, I didn't get to see him, but I can tell you they're not passing him through waivers. He's getting claimed. So unless he looks bad at camp, which I don't think will be the case from what I heard today, actually looked good, that I don't think Friedman's going anywhere. And I think Bill Metzler is absolutely right. He said to me on the podcast he will be the 8th defenseman with the team. Other guys, man, it's interesting to see how many of these guys are at camp. Like even a guy like Linus Sandin, I haven't really mentioned him. I mentioned him a little bit, but a complete X factor. I personally think he's maybe more of a taxi cab. I think the transition might hurt him a little bit, but I don't know. I mean, he has some really good numbers. He wasn't necessarily on fire when he came here, but the previous season, I expect him to be more of a taxi cab guy, just transitioning alone transitioning from league to league and taking a little bit of time to process that. But he is an adult. I believe he's 24 years old. He's not really at a point where he needs to spend time in the AHL. He's already been playing against men and successful at doing so. So there is a chance that he makes the team, or he could just make the team. I mean, quite frankly, or a taxi cab guy. And I think a taxi cab guy could definitely be in his near future. Maybe a guy like Andy Andreoff won't make it because of Linus Sandin. But let's talk Claude Giroux. I want to take a second to kind of really focus on him and the impact. He's one of those players that I think this city underestimates. I think they don't realize what a burden it's probably been on Giroux, and I would even include Voracek in that. To some degree, to be on a team that knowingly was holding back through their prime. I mean, you can say what you want about Hextall. I'm a big fan of Ron Hextall. I love a lot of the moves he made. I understand why he lost his job. I wish he would have did things a little differently to keep it. But again, I like Chuck Fletcher as well, so I'm not necessarily a favoritism here. But I think it's important to remember that Claude Giroux is special. Jake Voracek is a special player as well. I really like him. But I think with Claude Giroux, I think we just have to understand it's not typical situation. He's not a typical person. He's not average. He's not thinking average. I don't think the organization is going to him and going, hey, Claude Giroux, hey, listen, we need more out of you. I mean, maybe they've said a couple things, hey, something wrong. We know his production's not the same, maybe something like that. But I think when you see a guy that's, quite frankly, over a decade, one of the best players in the National Hockey League, and just brings it, carried a C, was one of the sole reasons this team was competitive at all over like a 5-year span, because there was not enough talent to really put together a playoff team outside of Giroux, Simmons, and Voracek. And just Giroux and Voracek were so much better than everybody else on a considerable night. And we see it now with Edmonton, and I'm not saying it's McDavid and Draisaitl, but we had Giroux and Voracek. These guys were at the top of the league too. It's like Sagan and Jamie Benn, right? We're talking about elite players who will, and most likely Giroux's number is getting retired as a Flyer. Let's be honest. It's gonna happen. So let's give him a little recognition to know that this is a heroic player. This isn't a player you watch slowly fade into the night. It could happen. It happens to good players all the time. It definitely does. But why does it have to happen to Claude Giroux? From what I understand about Claude Giroux, he's proven it. 2 years ago, he had a 100-plus point season. And it seems like we've been talking about his demise ever since. He has his best season ever. I mean, if people really look at a lot of veterans are still putting up great numbers in the NHL. Some of them the best seasons they've ever had. And I think a lot of that's a team thing. And I think this is the best Flyers team that I have seen in a long time. And last year they were very good, but they had injury problems. This year we lose Niskanen, but we have a bunch of young talent here. This is the most talented team I have seen Claude Giroux on by far. And I think this camp, I can't stop talking. There's endless amount of stories to talk about in this lineup. Endless. And every single player can be fighting for a spot. I would say this team is, 18 forwards deep on forward, right? And 10 defensemen deep on D. Of guys who could probably play pro level if we need them to. Immediately, just coming into camp. If Zamula was our bottom pairing defender, would anybody really be worried? Does anybody remember that time where Friedman is the extra guy? We hope we can keep him. Oh, what do we do with Sam Morin? Let's put him as a forward. Never. This is what Hextall did. All the pain and suffering that he made us suffer and himself suffer, which he paid the ultimate price. He's the one who lost his job in the end. And Hextall, and he held back. He signed that JVR deal. That was the only deal he grabbed. He thought he could grow with the team, but he was building something like this, and Fletcher's done a great job taking over. And I think Claude Giroux, it's his time. Let's give him the opportunity, because he's there. He's capable of being that guy. He doesn't have to be the leading point producer on the team. He usually is, but if he is this year, that means this team is probably, arguably, maybe the best team in the league. We'll see. They were arguably the best team in the league at the end of last year too. I don't know if they're really that team, We'll see. They have to do it consistently, but a lot of teams have taken a step back and a lot of teams have taken a step forward, so we're going to see some shuffling. It's going to be an interesting season. It's a great day one.